Buckle up, folks. It's going to be a crazy finish to the Wild Wild East. This is the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We did it, Dave. We did it. We accomplished our goal. We have gotten to 5,000 subscribers. Let's go. Thank you very much to all 5,000 of you out there who subscribe to the podcast, and to our everydayer and the loyal listeners who tune in to Dave and I and listen to us talk and appreciate and value our opinions. We really do want to thank you guys from the bottom of our hearts for all the support, and it's a pretty big accomplishment and milestone. I think we're just the second team in the Locked On NHL family to get to 5,000. Our boys up north, Locked On Sens, they got a pretty good following, but we are right behind them in terms of our listenership, and hopefully we can go on a long playoff run and try and build off of that. But we do want to thank everybody. And, like we said, once we get to 5,000 subscribers, we'll be doing a giveaway. And we indeed will be giving away an Auston Matthews jersey to one lucky subscriber. We are going to, over the next couple of days, talk about how we're going to go about doing this giveaway contest. So make sure to come back tomorrow and the next day to hear details on how you can win yourself a jersey just in time for the Stanley Cup playoffs. And speaking of the Stanley Cup playoffs, Dave, holy smokes, was Monday night ever an insane slate of games that just It didn't clear anything up for us. It made things much more murkier heading into the final couple of days of the NHL season, didn't it?
You want chaos? You got it.
We got it.
Don't you just love chaos on a Monday?
Dude, what's nice is like the Leafs, they're set into like their third place spot. Doesn't matter. They could lose out. They could win out the rest of the way. Does not matter. The Leafs are third place starting on the road. But what's interesting is over the course of the last couple of days, their opponent is not set in stone yet. Florida still has a chance to jump Boston if Florida wins this game tonight against the Maple Leafs and Boston loses their game. I believe they play. Who do they play? They don't play a very good team. Hold on. I just had it pulled up a second ago, but I think it's like Ottawa, I believe.
Yeah, they play Ottawa. They host Ottawa.
So they host Ottawa. So if Boston wins that game, obviously they have first place in the Atlantic, and it doesn't matter. But I do find it interesting how, all of a sudden it might be Toronto-Boston round one if Boston wins and Boston loses and Florida wins tonight. But let's get back to Friday, because Friday it was crazy. And the reason why that scenario exists is because Boston lost to the Washington Capitals, and we will get into the Maple Leafs and how they all factor in and tee up tonight's game. But it all kind of leads into that conversation based on what happened Monday. Washington beats Boston 2-0. Washington keeps in lockstep, on their playoff path. Detroit beats Montreal in an insane game. They were down 5-4 in the final minute, and Shane Gostisbehere went full Odell Beckham Jr., hopped about 3 feet in the air, yanked a puck back down, kept it alive, and then Lucas Raymond ends up scoring the game time goal. Did he score the goal in overtime as well? Yeah, like Lucas Raymond turning into an absolute stud out in Hockeytown. That keeps Detroit in things. The Islanders defeated the Devils. The Islanders actually did book themselves a playoff spot. They're guaranteed that third place division in the Metro. So that at least we do have locked in and set in stone. But Pittsburgh beating Nashville 4-2 keeps them alive in this playoff race. The Rangers beating Ottawa Friday night allowed them to clinch the Eastern Conference number 1 seed. So they clinch. Was it? They don't have the President's Trophy, or was that the President's Trophy? I know they had the 1 seed, and they're guaranteed home ice all the way through the Eastern.
Yeah, the
side.
Rangers get the President's Trophy. They locked that up.
That was I know it was the East, but that was the whole President's Trophy.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Trophy.
So they got themselves a President's Trophy tonight with a win over Ottawa. And then Philadelphia ends up staying alive in this playoff race as well. So it's wild. It's maddening what's going on right now in the NHL. The final few days are going to be absolutely electric. And I think we have the scenarios. If you want to pull up the tweet from Frank Saravalli. Yeah, here are the scenarios for the final E spot for all 4 teams that are vying now for 1 spot, that final wild card spot. You've got Washington, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. All 4 teams, 1 game to go for each of them. And there is a path for each team to make the playoffs. Why don't you run through it, Dave?
Yeah, so for Washington, it's pretty simple. You win against Philly, you clinch a playoff spot. If you don't happen to do that, you need to get a point against Philly, and you need the Red Wings to lose, and the Flyers and any Penguins loss to the Islanders. Basically, easiest path for Washington, as we said. Win, and you're in.
Yeah.
The Red Wings would need to beat the Canadiens, and the Capitals would need to earn 1 point or less against Philadelphia, or they get 1 point against Montreal, and the Capitals lose in regulation, and the Penguins only get about a point or less. It's basically a loss.
Yeah.
Penguins, they would need to win against the Islanders, the Capitals, Red Wings to earn a point or less, or the Penguins can get a point against the Islanders, the Capitals, Red Wings both lose in regulation. The Flyers, you get a regulation win. That's important. Regulation win against the Capitals. Then the Red Wings have to lose in regulation against Montreal, and the Penguins would have to lose in regulation. Essentially, the Flyers have the worst tiebreaker.
Yeah.
So essentially, they're screwed the most out of all this.
Yeah.
The Capitals have the best path.
Yeah. The Capitals
they win and they win.
Right. They hold their own destiny in their hands, right? They win and they're in, and that's it, right? And they're playing Philadelphia, which they have not been playing some good hockey of late. So the Washington Capitals at this point do look like they are going to be the favorites. But the fact that we're going into like the final night of the NHL playoffs, like all these teams have 1 game, and there's still 4 teams that have a shot at making the playoffs is absolutely insane to me. And it's not just, these 4 teams have a chance to make the playoffs, but as I alluded to earlier, the Atlantic Division is still up for grabs. Like Boston losing to Washington not only kept Washington in lockstep to locking down that final wild card spot, but it also gave Florida an opportunity to surpass the Bruins if they win tonight in Toronto and Boston loses that game against Ottawa, which means like these 2 games have implications for the Leafs when it comes to the playoffs. Why don't we take a break, come back, get into those scenarios? We could debate what we'd rather see happen potentially, and then we'll tee up tonight's game, Leafs and Panthers. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and in the NHL, and baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We are a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast. We got new episodes coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, on every platform, and also up on YouTube, where we've just surpassed the 5,000 subscriber mark. It was the goal that we set for ourselves at the beginning of the season, and with just a couple of days to spare, Dave, we got there. We got there. So thank you to all the listeners. And as we noted previously, we are giving away a Maple Leafs jersey. It's going to be an Auston Matthews jersey. And over the next couple of days, we'll explain exactly how all the listeners can get themselves involved and try to win that jersey. And we'll keep it open a little bit even for the new subscribers, right? The new people. If you hadn't yet subscribed, you could still subscribe and have your chance to win that jersey up until, obviously, we close it when we give it away. But there's still an opportunity for you to subscribe and get yourself involved in that giveaway somehow. All right. So, Dave, tonight's game, Leafs, Panthers, playoff implications are on the line here for Florida. If they win and Boston loses, the Panthers win the division, and then we see a Battle of Florida in round one, and then it'll be Leafs Bruins in round one. If Florida loses tonight to Toronto, that locks in Boston Tampa round one, and then Leafs and Florida in round one. Which would you prefer, the Florida Panthers or the Boston Bruins? And do you think, I'm going to ask you the opposite question. If you're Florida, who would you prefer, the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Tampa Bay Lightning in round one?
Man, if you're Tampa, obviously Tampa doesn't care.
No, if you're Florida, you're playing Florida.
Man,
you're Barry Zito or Bill Zito, who got
who got an extension today. Congratulations,
extension and promoted to president of hockey ops. So whole nine. Yeah.
Man, I think the Panthers would probably prefer the Leafs. I think so.
As opposed to winning the division?
Yeah.
Keep in mind that also, but if you win the division, you also get home ice advantage in round two.
If you play Boston.
If you win. But no matter what, they get home ice. If they win the division, they get home ice in round two.
But I'm saying, if they get second, and let's say Boston loses in round one, they would still have home ice advantage. So.
Right. Sure. Yes.
But yeah, you secure yourself easily for the first two rounds of the playoffs, guaranteed home ice.
Right.
But the thing is, again, who do they match up better against? I think they still. I think so. Because look what they did last year.
Yeah.
Right.
The reason why I ask is just because, I don't know, if you're Florida, do you sit some guys out tonight? Do you really go pedal to the metal, or do you kind of...
Paul Maurice already did say that depending on what happened in the game on Monday, that would dictate what their lineup would be like on Tuesday. So he was preparing. I think Paul Maurice definitely wants to go for the division. He wants that home ice. I think it sends also a good message to the team. Last game, let's go. Let's win this thing. It makes you feel, it gives us a little more pep to the step. I think they're definitely going to go all for it. They're still without a few players. I know that obviously Ekblad, Verhaeghe are out. They're not back until the playoffs. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, he's day-to-day. He could play. And there was, Barkov missed practice, but they're just being cautious. He's probably someone where it's do we want to, if Barkov's not 100%, are we going to put him into a game like this?
If Boston would have won tonight and made this game meaningless in terms of seeding and standings, Barkov probably doesn't play. But because the division is still up for grabs, Barkov probably plays tonight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. They almost have, and I guess it doesn't really matter because Boston's probably most likely to beat Ottawa anyways, and get that. Although Ottawa's been a bit of a tougher out recently, and you never know what could happen here. But Florida is in an interesting scenario where they could guarantee Toronto with their first pick or in the first round if they were to, lose tonight or not give it their best or not play their best lineup and give Toronto the best opportunity to win the game because we know that Toronto's going to be sending out a pretty good lineup as expected, right? What we saw basically the other night or yesterday in practice. And I think that it's going to be an interesting game. It is going to be interesting. And I did not expect I thought that it'd be more of like a message sending game because these two teams would be locked into playing each other. But based on how things have unfolded over the last couple of days, it may not be a prequel to round one. It very well may not be that indeed.
It's going to be crazy. I didn't expect it to come down to the wire like this. I figured that one of these two teams would have been in a good, like Florida held that spot for quite a bit. Then Boston crept back up. Then it was a bit of a yo-yo between these two, but I expected one team to kind of firm it up. But Florida went on a pretty brutal run where they weren't, they like Paul Maurice went on one of those again. We're not playing well. And Bruins, they kept them right in there and they took that spot. I think Boston knows that they want that home crowd.
Yeah.
They want that. For them, it makes, I think, more an advantage than Florida, in my opinion.
Probably. Okay, so I'm going to put it back on you, but now you're Toronto, right? So I asked you if you're Florida, how would you go about this game? If you're Toronto, would you rather play Florida or Boston in round one?
I would say Florida round one.
See, I'd rather play Boston.
Yeah?
I think I'd rather at least play Boston. Yeah, there was a graphic that was going around. I think I shared it. Megan Chayka, yeah, from Stathletes. She does some work with TSN also. She was kind of posting. She posted a post on X, basically saying how the Leafs and Panthers match up well against each other. Just basically, it's like the Leafs have like an elite offense where they rank basically second in every single statistical category that there is, whether it's slot shots, slot passes, expected goals, whatever it may be. Here it is. Here we're showing it up on YouTube. So the Leafs rank second in the league in goals per game, expected goals per game, scoring chances, slot shots, and inner slot shots, which is awesome. That's great. You want to be leading in those categories. Those are massive offensive categories. The problem is you look at the Florida Panthers side of the chart where it's showing how they match up defensively against Toronto in these areas. Well, they're allowing the second least amount of goals per game. They allow the least amount of expected goals per game, the least amount of scoring chances, the least amount of slot shots, and the least amount of inner slot shots. So it's almost as if it's strength versus strength. But the problem for me is, the goaltender gives them an edge. Defense wins championships is a mantra that, I do firmly believe. And also, the offense on the Florida Panthers side of things is a lot better than the defense on the Leafs. Like if you were to reverse that, where you're looking at what Toronto does defensively compared to Florida's offense, I would imagine it would be quite jarring how different it would be.
Yeah, I know that. Like Florida, we know Florida was the biggest surprise this season.
Mm-hmm.
I just think the Leafs have played well against Florida this year, and that's what gives me, like, if you just look at
they played great last year in the regular season and the season before that. Even the players, like statistically, their numbers were fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Like come playoff time, it's a different game. and Florida's well equipped to play that style of game.
And
And
so is
those
Boston.
numbers suggest that too.
Yeah, I mean, so is Boston too. That's the thing. It's like almost like picking your poison with either one. I mean, you're gonna have to likely have to go through both. So it's almost
I don't know, man.
like
Tampa could do some damage to either of those teams. But
they certainly could.
It's gonna be wild, man. Like ultimately, yes, they're both gonna be difficult opponents, and Toronto's gonna be the underdog, whether it is Boston or whether it is Florida. But I find it awesome that the Leafs are going into Game 81, and we still don't know who their playoff opponent's gonna be. But whether the Leafs win or lose tonight could have some playoff implications on who that opponent could be. Not to say that they're going to take matters into their own hands and throw the game, or that Florida's going to throw the game. That doesn't happen in the NHL. The players try and win every single game they can, and the coaches obviously. But it's going to be fascinating to see how this thing ends if they have an opportunity to leapfrog, and all of a sudden we've got Leafs Bruins in round one instead, and then the Battle of Florida. I think in terms of ratings, that probably would be a lot better from like a TV and from like a showman perspective. You got an original six matchup, that rivalry with the Bruins and the Leafs. They've got the Battle of Florida. That's what I think the NHL would want to see happen. We'll see how things kind of shake out there. All right, let's come back and get into some of the practice updates, because that will tell us what things might look like from a Maple Leafs perspective in tonight's game against the Florida Panthers. So we'll come back. And also, Matt Murray has risen from the dead. As someone in our Discord said, Undertaker Murray has made a return to the ice. We'll tell you about that next. Today's show is brought to you by Sleeper. Regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you got to do is pick where the studs like Crosby or McDavid, McKinnon, Matthews. McDavid just scored his 100th assist, by the way. Just got that notification. And whether or not any of those players will record more or less in their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in any given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Leaf fans. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper terms of use for details and locational availability. Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast. We got the Leafs taking on the Florida Panthers. I was going to say Boston Bruins, but maybe that's a premonition to what is to come potentially. But no, it's Leafs.
He's manifesting that in that round one matchup now.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I feel like I would prefer the Bruins. I really, really would. I just think like down the middle, I still don't believe Boston is nearly as scary as what Florida could be. And you look at, I don't know, but defensively, like the thing is, the Bruins have an unreal goaltender and they got a couple of great defensemen. But statistically, obviously, we just saw the Panthers had the best stats among all the teams in the NHL when it comes to defensive play and how they protect the net and the slot and inner slot and how they, don't give up a lot of scoring chances. So that's kind of where my head's at, I suppose, when we're talking about these two. But the Leafs do not have a say in tonight's game. They are guaranteed to play the Florida Panthers, obviously. It's game 81 of 82 on the schedule. And we do have some updates on who is going to play tonight. I know there was some discourse about whether or not Matthews was going to play, whether he's, gonna try and get rested at some point. If he's, doesn't get 70 goals on Saturday, is he going to rest this week, or is he going to try and strive for it? Well, it looks like he's going to be in the lineup at least for the Tampa game, but he's not going to be with Max Domi, who missed practice and will not play against the Florida Panthers. He's to be determined, I suppose, for Wednesday. And McMann also not going to be playing either of these games down in Florida. So that's 2 players in the top 6 that that essentially have been, playing for the last couple of weeks here for Sheldon Keefe, that now we need a bit of a lineup juggle here. And it looks like Matthews and Marner have been reunited for the final couple of games here of the regular season, hoping to get some spark there and hopefully get Matthews his 70th goal tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's and even I'll say one thing about McMahon. John Tavares came out and said, like, that's a big loss for us, and he, like, really hopes he'll come back soon. So shows how much respect Bobby McMann has. But yeah, we talked about whether Mitch Marner and Auston Matthews would get back together. Happened a little sooner than we expect, obviously, injury aside. But hey, if Matthews is going to get to 70, I'm sure he doesn't mind if Mitch is the one that's feeding him that opportunity to get to 70.
It would be poetic, right? Like those two have been kind of attached at the hip for the last few years now. Like all the milestones that he's been hitting, over the last couple of seasons have been with Mitch at his side. I guess outside of like the last couple of weeks here, where Mitch was injured and then came back and hasn't been with him because he's been had really good chemistry here with Domi and Bertuzzi. I'll be curious though, like if Bertuzzi or if Domi's good to go come game 1, like do they go back to that, or does Keefe really just see Matthews and Marner as his set top line, and that's how he's going to want to go about things going forward? I don't know. We'll see. But at least for tonight, those two are going to be reunited. Matthew Nyes gets put back up into the top 6. He'll be alongside Tavares and William Nylander. And on the third line, you've got Nick Robertson along with Pontus Holmberg, and Noah Gregor checks back into the lineup tonight on the third line. And then the fourth line, we've got Kampf, Dewar, and Ryan Reeves. And I believe that will be the team's fourth line, and that is Keith's preferred fourth line going into the playoffs. And that's kind of what the practice lines and the expected lineup for tonight. That's kind of one thing that jumps out to me is it seems like he's locked in and settled in on a fourth line here. And the
the only thing I wonder is like if with Domi and Marner back, like 2 guys have to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like, you're not taking, like, would that be another Matthew Nyes going down to the fourth line?
Well, we don't know when Yarncroc is going to return though either. Like he may not be available. Like Sheldon Keefe in practice kind of alluded to he might not be available for game 1 of the playoffs, which means the only guy who's probably going to come in is, I would assume, Domi, like maybe McMann is ready to go for game 1. But the 2 guys who come out to me is probably going to be Nick Robertson and Noah Gregor for those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I probably, because I think you want to keep that defensive minded approach too, especially with the penalty kill and things like that. I think they wanted to give Nick Robertson some games to get himself set, but you also have to be cognizant that when you're putting Nick Robertson as, yes, he has the offense, but the other areas he's not going to be really on the ice for. So I can see that for sure. For me too, what I'm looking at in these like final 2 games here, it's not even the forwards, because that hasn't been the issue. It's going to be the blue line, because I don't even think Sheldon Keefe is set on his 6. Like, I think right now it should be set based on what we saw at practice, but I feel like there's some inkling in him that's still trying to figure out a way to get TJ Brodie back into his lineup. He wants to keep that alive, but right now I don't see it.
Well, for those who didn't see what happened at practice on Monday, TJ Brodie was skating as the odd man out, skating as almost the 9th defenseman on the team.
Yeah. Wasn't even on a pairing.
No.
Not even on the extra 4th made-up pairing of, like, it was Giordano and Timmins.
Yeah, which I'm not going to read much into that, to be honest. I don't know. That could just be the way that it was written out by the beat reporters. But yeah, the fact that he wasn't in the top 6, he wasn't one of the 3 pairs, and I just think they want the lefty righty thing to work, and I just don't see them looking at their D and saying Lyubushkin as our lone right hand defenseman is I don't think they'd like that. Like, I think they want another right-hand shot. And unfortunately, they didn't get a top 4 righty at the deadline. They didn't go after Chris Tanev, or they didn't pony up whatever it was to get a Chris Tanev. So they ended up going with Joel Edmondson, who, was a left shot defenseman. And unfortunately, they had an abundance of them already. So effectively, that bringing in Edmondson didn't really upgrade their blue line. It kind of just pushed TJ Brodie out of the lineup, if anything.
Right? Essentially, you gave yourself more options other than Brodie on that left side. And I think the fact that
Brodie could be a third pair guy. It's not like he's a 7th defenseman. That's the thing. It's like Sheldon Keefe looks at Brodie. It's like, well, you're either a top 4 or you're not on the team. It's like, why can't you play third?
It's like minutes? For Brodie, it's either your right side playing with Morgan Riley, or you're on the right side on the third pairing, in my opinion, because Edmondson.
It should be that way. Should be that way, but doesn't feel like Keefe is giving him the option to be on the third pair, which is bizarre.
It is, but I also think when you look at we saw how this team play with one right shot in the lineup, and it wasn't pretty.
No, I know.
TJ Brodie we've never really considered that in the past, because TJ Brodie had done fine on the right side. He was top 4 right side defenseman. But I also think that the Jake McCabe switch to the right side changed the equation. Once Jake McCabe became that guy on the right side in the top 4, that was, I think, kind of Sheldon Keefe's way of saying, all right, we got 1 there. 2, it has to be undoubtedly has to work out. There can't be any question marks. And I think that's what happened with TJ Brodie there.
Yeah, so we'll see. He's not going to play tonight against Florida. We'll see if he gets reinserted back into the lineup against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But you're right. The fact that we are just 2 games until things are done and the real thing starts, on Saturday. And Keefe still not really 100% sure on his D pairings. That is a slight concern. Really quickly, I wanted to mention something before we get out of here for the night. Matt Murray has reemerged in hockey gear on an ice in a professional hockey game. He played for the Toronto Marlies over the weekend and won them the game. He won them the game, and they clinched a playoff spot with that win. Now, let's not get too excited. He did give up 5 goals in that game. I may add. Didn't allow a goal in the shootout, though. They won the game in a shootout, and he was perfect in the shootout. But I'm going to ask you this question, Dave. Could Matt Murray be an option in the playoffs?
No.
Matt Murray over Martin Jones or Matt Murray? Are you very firmly Jones?
I'm firmly Jones. The guy's
got 2 cups.
I know he has 2 cups, but he's only played 1 professional hockey game in a calendar year.
So far, luckily, the Marlies have made the playoffs. Oh, but I don't know if Matt Murray's capable of playing playoff games for them, because he wasn't on the roster on trade deadline day.
Well, I don't know how the loan for conditioning loan works for that, because it's not just games, it's days. So I think that plays a factor too, because guys who are on ATOs can play for the Marlies, guys who are on tryouts.
But I think they have to be on the roster on a certain date. Yeah. That's why Nyes, there was that paper deal to send him down on deadline day to make sure he was eligible for the playoffs should that arise. I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that question. I probably should check it out, but hopefully he is, and he's allowed to play a couple more games. Not for what it could mean for the Leafs or for him to come in and play savior for Toronto, much like he did do for Pittsburgh a couple of years back. It's been a while now since that happened, but I'm just saying. But hopefully for his career. I mean, as much as we goof and clown on the Matt Murray situation. I think it'd be awesome for him if he could resurrect his career elsewhere, prove that he can still play and that he's, recovered from that, from the surgery that he had this past season and which basically kept him out the whole year. But getting into that game on Saturday, we'll see if he can get into a few more American League hockey games. And if that's the case, maybe some team takes a chance and he can try and build himself back up into a goaltender at the National Hockey League level. But whether or not he's a playoff option, probably not. I was saying that a little tongue-in-cheek. But he is a guy who has some playoff pedigree. That was a big reason why Kyle Dubas made that swing and brought him in, because he's a guy who's won not one but 2 Stanley Cups in the past. So he can win those big games. He's played well in those big games before. Long time ago, but the history was there. Does Poppy hit 70 tonight? It's the last question I'm going to ask you before we take off. Does Poppy hit 70, and are they popping bottles after the game?
I think he does it, but I don't think they're popping bottles. I think he'll have his moment, but I just think you got to be all business. You have to be like, you guys can enjoy after the because likely if he does it, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the situation will be like for call-ups and the lineup for Wednesday. I don't expect, if he makes 70, I don't expect him to play on Wednesday. He can go out and he can celebrate if he knows he doesn't have to play a hockey game the next day. But I just think you got to keep it. Right. You get the moment on the ice. Like McDavid got 100 assists. He's clearly enjoying that. But I don't think they're gonna do that for Connor McDavid in Edmonton. I don't think the Leafs should do it for Matthews either.
No, I mean I was being very, very tongue in cheek, also saying they're gonna pop bottles. This isn't Major League Baseball. Okay,
no.
You don't pop bottles for regular season accomplishments, and then lose out 2 days later. From popping bottles to throwing the I was gonna say in hockey, throwing the clubs in your back seat. I suppose they're not doing that in baseball, but in hockey, that would be the what's the word I'm looking for here? That's what they'd be doing in hockey. We'll leave it at that. It's getting late, Dave. We gotta wrap it up before I stumble into some other words that I can't find myself getting into. So that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms, including up on YouTube. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow to break down the Leafs and Panthers game and then get you teed up for game 82 of the season. But first, enjoy game 81. Leafs, Panthers, go Leafs, go. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.